Howdy again everyone, and anyone who's interested in buying into Canon's EOS R system of mirrorless cameras will find themselves in an interesting position now with the launch of the new EOS R7. We are now in a somewhat unusual, although not unprecedented, position where Canon are currently making an APS-C camera with a smaller cropped sensor inside, which is more expensive than their value-priced full-frame camera, the little Canon EOS RP, which was launched a little over 3 years ago now, but contains a sensor based on a design from about 5 years ago. The whole world almost is crazy about full-frame cameras, and it's the dream of many amateur photographers to own one. Heck, I remember the excitement when my then girlfriend, now wife, was given a Canon 6D digital SLR, and being so excited at its amazing low-light capability and the narrow depth of field of its images. So why would you want to spend more on an APS-C camera with a smaller sensor? Why save up to buy a new EOS R7 with a cropped sensor when you could get all that full frame goodness on a little EOS RP? And is a lower resolution full frame sensor really always better when shooting in low light? Or can a brand new but much higher resolution APS-C sensor in the R7 beat it? Ever since I bought a Canon EOS R7, I've been fascinated by that question, so I asked Canon to loan me an EOS RP camera for testing, and they kindly did, thank you, for a couple of weeks, so I could figure this question out. Firstly, the build quality, and despite having the bigger sensor, the little full-frame RP camera is actually smaller and lighter than the new R7, and also it feels a little more solid in your hands. It actually feels very tough, like a high-quality product. In various interviews, Canon's designers have stated they really wanted the RP to feel this way, and oddly, the more expensive R7 feels a little cheaper and obviously isn't quite as portable. Those are the key advantages of the RP when it comes to build quality, but in virtually all other ways, the newer R7 pulls ahead. It has a useful joystick controller at the back for autofocus control, a dedicated ISO control button on the top, and a handy auto manual focus switch at the front. Both cameras have a bright, articulated screen, but at 1.6 million pixels, the R7's is much sharper than the RP's 1 million pixel screen, although the viewfinders of both cameras are pretty much the same. The R7 features a much bigger, but much more powerful battery than the RP, giving you over twice as much shooting time, and the R7 also features 2 SD card slots for more critical photography work. The newer EOS R7 also has a high-speed shooting mode literally 3 times faster than that of the RP, being able to shoot at 15 frames per second with a mechanical shutter, and even faster if you go with the electronic viewfinder. Another big advantage of the R7 is that its sensor is image stabilized, whereas with the older RP camera it's not, and you're left to the mercy of whether your lens is image stabilized, and a number of full-frame prime lenses are not. The R7 also works much more quickly, featuring Canon's latest and incredibly powerful Digic X processor, so its autofocus is quicker and has way more options than the older RP, with its older Digic 8 processor. The R7 also has a few extra little tricks up its sleeve, like automatically putting the shutter down when it's turned off in order to keep the sensor free of dust, and it also features focus tracking for macro work and animal eye autofocus for wildlife photography, both features which are also missing from the older full-frame RP camera. Overall, when it comes to build quality, I massively appreciate the R7's better speed, professional features, and better controllability. Frankly, it dumps all over the RP. However, if I put my hobbyist hat on, then I actually much prefer the smaller sized, lighter weight, and slightly more solid feel of the full-frame RP camera. I guess as someone who likes landscape photography, my brain is conditioned at this point to love lightweight gear. There's nothing wrong with the RP, it's just that it works a bit like a camera from a technical generation ago. But much more interesting than all that are the differences in image quality between the two cameras. The R7's 32.5 megapixel sensor should give a lot more detail than the RP's 26 megapixel one, but the RP's full frame sensor should wipe the floor with the R7's densely packed crop sensor when it comes to low light performance. But then again, the RP sensor is pretty old design now, so let's take a look. Firstly, resolution. The R7 with its 32.5 megapixel sensor is on the left, and the RP with its 26 megapixel sensor is on the right. When shooting in RAW mode, both cameras are capturing lots of sharpness here, although unsurprisingly, the R7 has a distinct advantage, and the lower resolution RP camera also seems to show a tiny bit more moire if you look at the very finest details in the middle of the circle there. Let's switch from RAW mode over to JPEG mode. Both lenses lose a little fine detail there, but the RP is definitely doing worse. Canon's older cameras were a bit notorious for producing somewhat soft JPEGs, and you can especially see the difference in detail in the backpacker just above the test circle. Let's increase the ISO in both cameras to ISO 800. The R7 looks a little noisier now, with slightly lower detail, and the RP just looks a little softer. The image looks a touch washed out. At ISO 3200, the full frame and lower resolution EOS RP should be absolutely dominating the R7, but although both cameras are exhibiting more softness and noise, the R7 is surprisingly still holding its own. ISO 6400 and ISO 12800 again look just as bad on both, really. So overall, I'm surprised to report that the full frame sensor on the RP camera just isn't providing that low light advantage you would expect to see, perhaps because it's based on a design from 2017, whereas the R7 sensor is brand new. The RP's low light images look just a touch cleaner, but at the same time have less detail, looking a bit more mushy. It's a testament to the strength of the R7's amazing APS-C sensor. Standards really have improved over the past 5 years. How about video though? Surely at the end of the day, the RP's much bigger sensor could prevail here, or at least compete. Let's have a look at the 4K shooting mode on each camera. The R7 is in its 4K fine shooting mode, which is oversampled footage, and the older RP camera is in a cropped 4K mode, its only option. As you can see here, the 4K footage from the new R7 camera is simply light years ahead of the RP in terms of detail, which is an abject reminder that not all 4K shooting cameras are really producing decent 4K footage. Stop down to ISO 1600 and similar levels of noise are being produced by both cameras. ISO 3200 is really getting noisy now, but the newer R7 camera is holding things together just a little more here, I think, with the RP's footage looking distinctly blocky. Here's ISO 6400 and now ISO 12800. Both cameras are looking as bad as each other here in terms of noise, but the R7 is still capturing considerably more detail. It's certainly being helped out by its much more powerful Digic X processor, but still, the low-light fantasy of the RP's bigger sensor is kind of shattered here. And again, I'd say that that's not necessarily a criticism of the RP sensor, in as much as it's a testament to the R7's incredible power. Its smaller APS-C sensor is outpacing a full frame sensor from just a few years ago. By the way, I checked out the 1080p shooting modes on both cameras, and it was more or less the same story. The R7 was noticeably sharper, with slightly better high ISO noise performance than the older full frame sensor on the RP. Well, what do you think of all this so far? In terms of build quality, features, and especially image quality, you are seriously getting what you pay for in the more expensive Canon EOS R7. It really is an astonishing piece of equipment. Does the full-frame RP camera have any advantages at all, apart from being physically a little smaller than the R7? The answer is, well, yes, because you're still getting full-frame images out of the RP, with all the look and feel they offer, which you can't with the R7. The biggest difference is that narrower depth of field with the full-frame sensor, giving you more deeply out-of-focus backgrounds, which is especially desirable for portrait and other subject photography, which is probably the one area where I would consider buying the RP over the R7. Also, over the years, I've sometimes found that the quality of a lens's bokeh on a full-frame camera does look a little nicer, a little smoother, perhaps not all the time, but often. a cropped sensor tends to magnify bokeh problems that you wouldn't otherwise notice on the wider full-frame image, and that's a reason why medium format images tend to have such gorgeously soft bokeh. Well, in my opinion anyway. I realise what I'm saying here is a little subjective. Also, a lower resolution full-frame camera sensor is much kinder and less demanding to your camera lenses than a high-resolution cropped sensor, which is to say, you'll need to put a very sharp lens on your shiny new EOS R7 camera to really take advantage of that higher resolution in the first place, whereas the 26 megapixel sensor on the RP will be more forgiving and less expensive lenses will look just as good. And finally, at the moment, the R7's cropped sensor will temporarily be an issue for wide-angle photography enthusiasts. Canon don't currently make a normal RF mount lens that's wider than 14mm, meaning that if you do want to do some ultra-wide-angle photography on your R7, you'll need to adapt some other ultra-wide-angle lens onto your camera somehow, perhaps by using one of Canon's old EFS mount lenses and an EF to RF mount adapter. The only way to really get full frame style images on your Canon R7 or R10 APS-C cameras is to put some kind of speed booster focal length reducer adapter onto your R7, but those will always compromise your image quality, and they need full frame digital SLR lenses, and of course they cost extra money and add extra bulk to your camera. Overall, the new APS-C Canon EOS R7 blows away the full-frame RP camera in nearly every respect. It's a powerhouse of APS-C, whereas the RP really is a budget full-frame, and almost all serious photographers should get hold of the R7, I think, unless you're desperate to do wide-angle work. But anyone really desperate for that beautiful full-frame look and gorgeous out-of-focus backgrounds, especially portrait photographers, might find it's quite handy to save a bit of money and opt for the admittedly still quite lovely little RP camera instead. Thanks for watching everyone. I'm trying to experiment with camera reviews at the moment, get a nice consistent workflow going with them because that benefits everyone. I want to say thank you to all my supporters over on Patreon, as they are making a big difference in keeping this channel going, keeping me testing away. Check it out in the description below for all kinds of bonus content and early access, and as usual, ciao for now.